kids. And with the latest smartphones from Staples, they can keep in touch anytime, anywhere. Find gifts they'll love for every holiday budget at your local Staples store now. Ask an in-store associate today about our exciting offers.
Welcome back to News Talk Tonight with Jim Richards on the iHeartRadio Talk Network.
MPs in Ottawa moments ago struck a agreement to have a committee look into whether or not the Speaker Fergus, gets to stick around. We'll get to that with Rachel Aiello in a second.
Common sense conservatives are going to ruin your vacation as well. We are going to put in thousands of amendments at committee and in the House of Commons, forcing
Pierre Poilievre earlier today saying that he is going to slow things down and have ruined Christmas for all your MPs because he wants Trudeau to back off on the carbon tax. Is that what he's doing? Here's Rachel Aiello with us right now. She is a parliamentary journalist with CTV.
So he came out full of vim and vigor this morning and announced that his caucus is ready to essentially delay MPs' holidays until the Prime Minister retreats on his carbon tax. He's able to put this threat on the table because quietly over the last number of weeks, the Conservatives have been putting on notice a series, thousands of procedural motions and different amendments that, if called, could drag on House business overnight, long sitting through till the end of next week when MPs are going to rise. So he's essentially putting this out there as a threat to the Prime Minister. Now, I don't think it's a threat the Prime Minister is going to respond with by taking away the carbon tax. But basically, we're in for a couple weeks or a week and a half at least now of procedural shenanigans between now and the holiday break.
Do we have any polling? I'm not sure if it's been part of your discussions when you've talked or written about Pierre Poilievre and how successful he is, clearly now 19 points up in the last Nanos poll. Do we know how much this carbon tax this, axe the tax that, has resonated for him in that 19 points?
I would have to only guess that it's playing a role because of the advertising campaign he rolled out to this effect and how ardent he's been in continuing this line of positioning. But I don't have hard numbers on that. I do think, though, I think he's done a pretty good job of making it clear his position on the carbon tax. And definitely because of, first, the Prime Minister's carve-outs for some that got attention earlier this fall, and then this heated furor over this farming fuels bill, he's kind of been able to keep these calls alive.
It's interesting to me just because, talking to economists and hearing Vashi talk to people about, there's two different things that I think he's been successfully able to conflate into one, the affordability inflation crisis and making it the carbon tax. But most experts that I've heard say, you take the carbon tax off here and it's, maybe pennies in the problem that they're having when it comes to gas prices and food prices, that they're maybe two different things, but he has made them the same thing, and more power to him because that's probably a good portion of him convincing people that Trudeau's doing a bad job with the economy.
He was definitely part of his speech to caucus again today. He's really kind of taking the approach because of what happened in the Senate yesterday, essentially very narrowly senators voting to gut that farmers' private members bill, that he is now taking the fight back to the House. What I really thought is interesting over the last couple of weeks is this pivot from Poilievre back to more of the attack dog style that we've seen him be for years. Earlier in the summer and earlier in the fall, he was really trying to, I think, project a softer image, but maybe it's just the time of year and everyone's tensions are frayed. But the Poilievre we've seen this week and likely will next week is kind of getting back more to that. We're going to make it painful for the Prime Minister. He's not getting a vacation. We're going to sit here all night. And, he's really kind of getting back to that. Yep. That version, and I find that quite interesting.
I do find it interesting, too, because when I'm listening to some of the conversations that yourself and Vashi are having on radio and or television, it sounds like most people think that that's not necessarily a good idea, that he should soften himself up. But when you're 19 points up, taking advice from people who are telling you to do something else, maybe it doesn't make any sense, and he probably has numbers, or he goes where he feels comfortable.
or he's thinking, I'm comfortably enough ahead that this is the time to experiment, and we can see how much further into that line of the angry version can he kind of get back into, if that's a place that might be more comfortable for him. Maybe they're trying to play that out.
Yeah, it's interesting that the time, what are you thinking of the timing, too? I mean, I don't know if people have the appetite for it right now, but who knows? Maybe they do.
Well, I think what's interesting about this as well is how the Liberals are responding. We heard from the Prime Minister and his House Leader, Karina Gold, today, essentially saying this version of Poilievre is not a serious leader. This is gamesmanship. This is him talking to hear his own voice. This is essentially delaying support for Canadians, because ultimately what the Conservatives would do if they do advance this threat of thousands of motions is put off votes on key pieces of the government's economic legislation, things the government says are going to help Canadians, going to help workers, and they're trying to take the tact of pointing out to folks the practical impact of some of the procedural shenanigans we're watching unfold here on Parliament Hill.
Okay, we want to get to the vote on Speaker in a second, but could you explain that farmers bill that the Senate voted on last night?
Yeah, so it was a private member's bill from a Conservative MP, essentially trying to offer up an additional carve-out for farming fuels. He was saying that he's heard from farmers that the cost to keep their barns and other buildings warm has just gone exponentially up, and wanted to give them a break. It had made it through the House, was almost through the Senate, and then this last-minute amendment was brought forward, essentially carving out the big parts of the bill, what supporters of it have said, essentially gutting it. So what has to happen now, because it's a bill that started in the House and has been amended by the Senate, has to go back to the House of Commons, and because the political climate around the carbon tax has changed since this bill first made it through, they're really forecasting that it's going to be a long and unlikely road to pass it.
All right. The big story, though, maybe we buried it. The vote on the Speaker got himself into trouble for sending what he thought was a private message to a former colleague in the province of Ontario, a Liberal MP who's stepping aside, but he was wearing his robe. And that story not only went viral, but was on television, and people, I guess, reluctantly